Okay, so we're going to start with the first two operations of addition and subtraction. Okay, how do we handle the fact that if we have a complex number that's written in the general form, if we have two of them, okay, what does it look like when we add them? Well, bottom line is if we have those two, okay, we get the real part, okay, the new real part, if you will, okay, by adding the two individual real parts. Okay, and then we get the imaginary part by adding the two individual imaginary parts. Okay. So it's very much like combining like terms. Okay. I, we know, is a number, but really it kind of looks like a letter, of course, since it's I. Okay. And so when we add two things that are complex of the form a plus bi, then we just add the different parts that are like, if you will. We add the two real parts, and then we add the two imaginary parts. All right. And subtraction, same deal. Okay, if we are going to subtract two imaginary numbers, we just subtract the real parts and we subtract the imaginary parts. Okay. All right. So with that said, if we take an example like 2 plus I, which is of the form a plus bi, and we have to do 9i minus 3. Okay. What I would do first on this problem, and you don't have to do it this way if you can visualize it without it, is I would change the form of the second one so it's in a plus bi form instead of bi plus a, if you will. Okay. All right, and then from there, what I want to make sure I do to get the final answer here is I want to take my real part, so which is 2, and I'm going minus negative 3. Okay, and so of course that part's going to be plus plus. Okay, another suggestion besides doing it in your head, because you could certainly do that and get 5 and then negative 8i. I would also suggest that changing it to an addition problem and then changing the signs of the second one, adding the opposite, if you will. Okay, that way we don't have to worry about the subtraction part. We can just change it to an addition problem by changing the signs of the second one. And that way we can add the parts and get 5, and then 1i plus negative 9i would be negative 8i, and we'd be done. Okay. Now, one of the things we might ask is, what's the purpose of adding and subtracting these numbers? What good does that do us? I mean, obviously we can do it. It's just a skill that we can learn and practice. Okay. But ultimately, there's some repercussions with complex numbers that we're going to deal with later on in the class. Okay. And also calculus, where we're going to need to be able to have that skill of being able to add and subtract and multiply and divide to these kind of numbers. Okay. We already know how to do those 4 things with real numbers. Okay, so what we're learning is making sure we can do that with complex numbers also. Okay. Questions so far? All right. The next part then is doing multiplying complex numbers. And when we have two complex numbers, both of that form a plus bi, okay, I have a hint right here. It says use the FOIL method. So we're just going to treat them like they're binomials, and we will use the FOIL method. So let's see what that's going to look like. If we do the first, which would be 3 times 4, that would be 12, of course. If we do the outside, I got 3 times negative I, would be negative 3i. If I do the inside, 2i times 4 is going to be plus 8i. And then finally, if I do the last, it's going to be 2i times negative I squared. Be negative 2i squared, or negative 2i I should say, gives us negative 2i squared. All right, and so that would be the FOIL part of that, and then the rest of it is just simplifying. And I'm going to do this simplifying first. Okay, I'm going to combine these two like terms. Okay. And then the other question is, how about this right here? If I have 2i squared. Remember earlier we defined the square root of negative 1 to be our I, true? So what would I squared be then? If I squared both sides of that equation, I'd get what? I'd get negative 1. True? So I squared would be equal to negative 1 if I were to square both sides. Okay? Alright, so if that's the case, then what do I really have here that I circled? This is really 2 times negative 1. Okay? So it's really minus negative 2 then, isn't it? And so therefore, when I combine like terms and do my plus plus, okay, I'm going to wind up with 14 plus 5i. Questions? So again, key element when we do that last right here, this is always going to be something I squared. Okay, And whatever sign this is, whether it's positive or negative, I would just make sure I calculate it this times I squared, which is that times negative 1. Okay, and then it's minus negative 2, of course. And if we add those, again, combining the real parts and the imaginary parts, we can get our 14 plus 5i. Okay. Questions so far?